Sunless Skies is a very unique experience, with its text-based sections and gorgeous world resulting in one of the strongest narratives I've ever seen in a game. It's not for everyone, however, and despite how much I love it, this is a textbook example of a niche title. With a lot of mechanics, it simply won't click with people. If you can push past the slow parts, however, this is a truly unforgettable game, and one I hope gets a lot more attention in the coming years. To give a bit of backstory, this is actually the third game in the series, with a 2015 prequel known as Sunless Sea and the original releasing way back in 2009 as a text-based browser game called Fallen London, which still receives regular updates. The premise is that following the death of Prince Albert, his wife Queen Victoria was completely distraught, famously wearing black and mourning for the rest of her life. In this universe, she's approached by mysterious beings known as the Masters, who offer to bring her lover back to life in return for control of London. She agreed, and the city was somehow teleported into this spooky cavern known as the Neath, containing literal hell, squid people and many other horrors, being the setting of Fallen London and Sunless Sea. In Sunless Skies, however, England has remembered what made it so great in the first place and decides to take part in some good old-fashioned colonisation. God bless the British Empire. With this in mind, you find yourself in the early days of this new era, and, well, the sky's the limit. You play as a captain with your own crew, some basic quests to start you off, but by and large you're thrust into this universe and left to your own devices. The core gameplay loop is going to all these different islands, gathering info on them known as port reports and delivering them to whatever factions you align with in each area for various rewards, while also interacting with any locals you come across and selling goods at fluctuating market prices. The game's very slow as a result, and you'll need a lot of patience to get past the early game grind of gathering resources to fully interact with the world around you. It's very much a slow burn, and the game's narrative paces itself accordingly, greatly lessening the tediousness of the entire thing. As you've probably realised, the vast majority of this game is text-based, so if you get into this, be aware that it's essentially a visual novel at times, and I've easily spent upwards of an hour just reading new information given to me at ports. The dialogue's the meat of the game essentially, and is delivered in a deliberately obtuse manner where you really have to think about the meaning of the text given. It can be frustrating at times, but mostly it's an immensely satisfying experience to come across a landmark that helps contextualise previous information given to you, allowing you to piece all the clues to a prior mystery together. The game does a fantastic job of combining the writing and visuals in its storytelling to deliver impactful moments, some of which being my most memorable experiences of the year. The world we're in and the atmosphere conveyed are the selling points, and when it comes to the presentation, this is one of the finest I've seen in years. Where the game shines in this regard is with its crew comments that appear throughout your journeys. Most of the time there are snippets of information about the area you're in or quips from your crew, and they do a great job of breaking up the monotony of travel with some new info delivered in an unobtrusive manner, while also helping to establish the right tone. I haven't really talked about it so far, but this is a survival game with fuel, cargo and a terror meter to keep track of, and the comments about the state of your supplies will always stop you getting too comfortable. When your crew are on the verge of going crazy, nothing helps bring in that sense of dread faster than seeing their increasingly paranoid and panicked responses to the creepy ports around them. Speaking of ports, each one has its own theme, from dilapidated circuses and shitty beach resorts to the weirder sides such as space god worshipping cults and mausoleums where the dead are still very much alive. There's a British phrase, keep a stiff upper lip, which is supposed to signify our people's resolve when facing adversity, which probably explains our dry humour and how dreary we can be at times. The game encapsulates this saying quite well, with the characters having a quiet acceptance and resignation to all these weird events going on around them. So what if we're stuck in space with eldritch horrors? There's no use complaining and we just have to get on with it. It adds a whimsical side to this otherwise frightening setting and is very charming, being reminiscent of the humour of Discworld or those more light-hearted SCP entries you can find. Whether you're looking for some comedy, horror or romance, this game has it all. While most of your stories come from interacting with ports or other landmarks, you also have your own officers to interact with, featuring a colourful cast of characters all with their own secrets. Each one has a personal mission and are a decent introduction into various parts of this world, giving you the opportunity to learn about devil behaviour and giving insight into what remains of the monarchy, for example. Perhaps most importantly, however, they also give you some pretty hefty stat bonuses once their questline's completed. Your four main stats are as follows: Veils, Hearts, Iron and Mirrors. Veils is mainly for thievery and evasion checks, Hearts can help your mood and encourage crew, Iron's handy for more brute force methods, and Mirrors helps with investigation, such as deciphering runes for example. These stats are put to use in the plethora of skill checks you'll be undertaking for just about every decision you make. Landed on an enemy island? Time to do an Iron check and see if you can repel them. Boarding a hostile vessel? Time for a Mirrors check to make sure you aren't caught off guard. No matter how prepared you think you are, your actions are rarely a guaranteed success, meaning there's always a level of tension knowing that you may lose supplies or crew. It's really just standard stat-based stuff for most RPGs, and does a good job of allowing you to further immerse yourself in the whole roleplay aspect of the game. I could go on and on about every feature there is, but quite frankly there's too much here. With the meat of the game being text-based, there's a wealth of outcomes, faction alignments, resources. There's so much to keep track of in this that it's virtually impossible to do everything unless you're willing to dedicate hundreds of hours. The game's tedious and slow, and in the same way you can't recommend Death Stranding to everyone due to its monotony, the same can be said here. For some people like me, however, the unforgiving nature of travelling, the slow burn of the entire narrative, all these aspects come together to create a fantastic example of ludonarrative consistency, with a huge, sprawling, unforgiving world that truly feels like an adventure to explore. This is role-playing at its finest, and nothing will ever compare to this experience for me.